Good morning. My name is Monica Weniger, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Bucks County. Thank you for joining us for the second of our three-part series on food insecurity and hunger in Bucks County. Today, we will focus on hunger in our student population, an extremely vulnerable, yet all too often overlooked population, and the short and long-term consequences that food insecurity has on their health, well-being, education, and economic future. Federal, state, and local governments make laws and provide funding to address local problems such as food insecurity. And we, as voters, need to understand those issues so that we can hold our legislators accountable. We hope that this series of programs will help you understand the scope of this problem in our county and learn what we, as concerned citizens, can do about it. This program will be recorded and available on our website and Facebook page. The League of Women Voters is a century-old organization dedicated to encouraging informed and active participation in government. We are nonpartisan and never support or oppose candidates or parties, but we do study issues of importance to voters and take positions on those issues. League members Kathy Beveridge, Liz Downing, and Lydia Winderman will be hosting this panel discussion. Liz and Lydia will be the discussion moderators, and Kathy will be our Zoom host. Kathy, will you begin?
Great. Thank you, Monica. Welcome, everyone. Happy spring. It's my pleasure to give everyone participating in today's webinar a quick overview of Zoom webinar tools. If you don't see one of the options I'm describing along the toolbar, click on the ellipsis, the three dots, or it says more sometimes, and you should see additional options. Hopefully you can see that we have enabled the closed caption live transcript feature for today's program. We hope this is useful to you. If you like it, do nothing and it will continue throughout the program. If you'd rather not see the captions, hover your cursor over the window where you see me talking so that the tools appear along the bottom of the window, and click on the little box with CC in it and choose to disable the feature. The captions tend to appear at the bottom of the window where you see me talking. If you want to move them to another location, you can hover over the box where the words are appearing. A little white hand may appear, and then click and drag the box to another location in the window. Participants today don't need to worry about being seen or heard during this program. In a Zoom webinar, participants are not visible and they engage in the discussion through the Q&A feature and the chat box. We encourage you to engage in our discussion using the Q&A feature. Hover over the window where you see me now, and the toolbar appears across the bottom. Click on Q&A. You can type in your question. If you like, feel free to indicate in parentheses the name of the panelist you'd like to answer the question. If you see that somebody else has already asked the question you wanted to ask, feel free to upvote that question by clicking on the thumbs up icon next to that question. And we'll get to as many questions as possible during the session. Please do be sure to type your questions in the Q&A section, not the chat window. We're only using the chat to share some supplemental information with you, like any websites mentioned by the panelists. And you can copy those from the chat window and paste them into a Word document so you can visit those sites after the webinar. Thank you. Enjoy the conversation.
Okay, well, thank you, Monica and Kathy, and many thanks to all of you for joining us today to continue our examination of this pressing issue. We have some very knowledgeable participants here today to give us a deeper look at the crisis right here in Bucks County. Lydia and I will be introducing them shortly. Today's discussion on food insecurity will focus on the widespread hunger among our student populations. I would like to start with a brief overview of the national food insecurity situation. This crisis is currently impacting our younger generation on multiple levels. Our K-12 students are experiencing significant increases in hunger since the beginning of the pandemic. Next slide, please. According to the National Education Association, the percentage of families reporting hunger has jumped significantly since the beginning of the pandemic. At the end of 2019, roughly 4% of families reported not having enough to eat. By July of 2020, the rate had risen to 14.4%. I can only assume the number has risen in the last 6 months as the pandemic has continued. Next slide, please. Those statistics are even more dramatic for students of color. The turquoise bar shows the percentage of students with food insecurity in 2018. The white bar shows the data for 2020. The contrast between white students and students of color is startling. Next slide, please. This has long-term effects on students. Educators report severe effects on the performance of students who are hungry. Nutrition has enormous effects on physical and cognitive development of children. Without sufficient nutrition, academic performance suffers. The truth is, hunger hurts. 46% of children from low-income families say hunger negatively impacts their performance. They're not wrong. Studies published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition Pediatrics and the Journal of American Academics of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry show that hunger greatly impacts a child's performance and behavior in school. Hungry children have lower math scores. They are also more likely to repeat a grade, come to school late, or miss it entirely due to illness. Next slide, please. Our post-secondary students face some different challenges than the K-12 population. The Hope Center, spearheaded by Sarah Goldrick-Robb, is a leader in research and advocacy on the challenges facing these students. Her organization has been doing extensive research at 2- and 4-year institutions. In her polls, she has gathered a great deal of data on these challenges. I find it eye-opening that such a large percentage of our young people are dealing with these issues. Next slide, please. This graph shows the level of food insecurity nationwide for 2- and 4-year institutions. Quantity and quality of food are a common concern for a large proportion of our students. It's disturbing to know that basic needs is a concern for so many people struggling to gain skills and education. Balancing academic needs with anxiety concerning food insecurity leads to an inability to focus effectively. Students often don't know that there is help available or where to turn for that help. Next slide, please. Basic needs insecurity among students in 4-year institutions is impacting the accessibility and quality of education for all people attending post-secondary institutions. The demographic of a college student in today's society continues to shift rapidly. Students are more likely to be older, be parents, or be retraining for new opportunities. Next slide, please. When we take a clear look at this graphic, it becomes obvious that many students are experiencing a wide range of obstacles while trying to gain skills and education. 2- and 4-year college students are heavily impacted. It's impossible to know yet what influence virtual education will have on these statistics. Each student has a unique set of circumstances, but financial challenges, including food insecurity, homelessness, and debt to a degree not previously experienced, will have an ongoing repercussion for decades to come. As we continue to look at food insecurity, I'd like to shift our focus to our local students and their situations here in Bucks County. Now, let me introduce our participants in today's discussion. Wendy Ullman served her community as state representative of the 143rd Legislative District from 2019 to 2020. Samantha Gross is the Associate Dean for Academic Initiatives in the Office of the Provost at Bucks County Community College. Jennifer Ritorto is the Head of Development at the YMCA of Bucks County. Jennifer will be telling us about her role in addressing food insecurity with our K-12 population. Her professional experience spans more than 20 years of working in writing, editing, marketing, and developmental roles for several media corporations and the YMCA. Currently, as Director of Development at the YMCA of Bucks County, Jen is responsible for managing a portion of the organization's corporate and foundation funding streams, including applying for new and renewal grant applications, maintaining compliance needs, including reporting and donor updates, and working with company sponsors on a county-wide level. The past several years, Jen has been particularly driven to finding financial resources to assist the feeding program at the Y, currently feeding 3,000 children a week. Food insecurity in the county is an issue for many children and families in Bucks County, and even more so now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Liz, for such a kind introduction. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for having me here to share about how food insecurity affects children and what we're doing at YMCA of Bucks County to combat this issue. I'd like to share why I personally feel passionate about it. After settling down in Bucks County 15 years ago with my husband, and soon starting a family a few years later, I was excited to find the Y, an organization that was doing so much for the community. When my older son was in the toddler childcare room right below my office, I noticed that some of the kids who would come in wouldn't bring anything to eat. One child really stood out to me because he usually brought in only a donut, never having a lunchbox with him. One day I asked the staff about him. I knew he needed more than a donut. Where was his milk? I knew that was so important for a growing toddler as a parent, and his lunch. I found out from the staff that he was part of a family with 6 children who were in and out of foster care, their mothers struggling to maintain several part-time, low-paying jobs. His older siblings were also in the Y's after-school program, and we knew they weren't eating much after school or on the weekends too. The staff told me that they would personally pay out of their own pockets for extra milk and food to keep it in the refrigerator during the week to provide for this little boy and others like him. I felt heartbroken to learn that sadly, there are many, many other children like him, and that food insecurity was a rampant issue for many children in our community. So when we began to offer the feeding program to our children in childcare and school age, I felt committed to working along with my colleagues to do everything we could to make sure all hungry children in our care were provided with healthy meals daily. I'm going to share with you now how the Y does that, how we feed children, and by how doing so, it helps to create equality for all. By making sure children are fed, we are creating a level playing field so that those living in poverty can have access to the same opportunities and ability to thrive as their peers. Can you go to the next slide, please? Through the presentation, I will focus on 4 points. 1, the exact statistics of hunger in Bucks County, and I know Liz covered a lot of that. And 2, how hunger impacts children. 3, the YMCA's response to hunger. And 4, our plans for expanding our feeding efforts moving forward. Food is the ingredients that binds us together. This quote is actually from Messa de Vita, which is a gourmet sauce company, but I like it because there's truth in that statement. Food can bind us and connect us to one another. And that's critical because connection is key. You can switch to the next. Because, and I love this quote by Brene Brown. Brene Brown is a social researcher and inspirational public speaker, and she says, connection is why we're here. We're hardwired to connect with others. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. And without it, there's suffering. When children are fed, they can connect better to others and to what's truly important in life. And I can't think of a better time to focus on this than now, during this pandemic, when children and families are more disconnected than ever. Next, please. So as promised, here are one of 4 points that I will share. Next. Prior to the pandemic, many children and families were already struggling in Bucks County, as I mentioned before. You can see the numbers here. Broken down, that means that 1 in 7 children were without food regularly, and now it's 1 in 4. So think about that for a moment. I'm sure all of you listening can think of a group of 4 children that you know. Picture that if out of every group of 4, 1 of them is hungry and they're wondering where their next meal is coming from. Next, please. So the Y responded with Operation Compassion. In March 2020, the Y saw that there was an urgent need to provide food and other critical resources when the pandemic began and provided this donor-funded program, Operation Compassion. Last March, also when the state shut down, we responded by delivering meal packets to families, feeding and providing showers to homeless families, and distributing food, along with educational kits to kids in our programs. Now, the needs have changed and evolved over the years, and our response has to change and evolve right along with it. And we are now serving even more people, including children who are in virtual and hybrid learning who come into the Y during the day. Next, please. So how does hunger impact children, school-age children? Next, please. We know that through research, hungry children are at an increased risk of developmental delays, many falling behind academically, physically, mentally, and socially from their same age peers. Children who are hungry are at risk of chronic illnesses, many developing asthma and anemia, and many children develop behavioral problems like hyperactivity, anxiety, and aggression. Next, please. So how has the YMCA responded to combat these issues of hunger in our community? Next, please. For almost a decade, we have been regularly providing healthy meals and snacks to children from daycare to preschool and in summer camp. We also feed cold suppers to kids after school and in our 21st century learning centers. We run holiday meal assistance program annually, such as delivering food like the Thanksgiving meals and distributing gift cards. And as I mentioned before, since the pandemic, there has been that additional urgent need to provide meals to more people and families within our programs and also out in the community, including those who are now isolated seniors who are stuck indoors, adults who have lost their jobs, and homeless families. Next please. As Liz so kindly mentioned, before the pandemic, we were feeding 3,000 children a week. And now we are working to expand our ability to provide even more food to more people who are hungry in Bucks County. And when the pandemic began, we had to think of creative ways to serve people because there were many restrictions that were put in place to keep people safe from the virus, such as food truck delays, which prevented us from accessing weekend backpack programs, limits in personal interactions, and that many of our programs were halted. We partnered with the school districts, restaurants, and food stores to provide meal deliveries, and our staff actually transported meals to and from homes. We also gave out gift cards to hand out to families so that they could purchase their own food. Next, please. Meals are served at our 21st century learning centers in Bristol Township, at the Fairless Hills branch, which is currently on hold due to a building renovation, and the Morrisville, New Britain, and Quakertown sites, so all across the county. Next, please. As you heard, the need is now greater than ever. It is our mission to expand our feeding efforts to make sure more families have access to food. Our plan includes making feeding a centralized focus of our YMCA youth development programs. So while our overall organizational mission hasn't changed, we are now committed to making our feeding efforts the center of our mission to serve youth. So as you see here, it's like the wheels of a spoke. Before, our youth offerings were in the middle, and food was one of the components that we provided. Now feeding children will be our prime focus and trickle out to all other youth we serve, such as in our childcare, preschool, and summer camp, as we've always done, but even looking beyond that and serving more children in our 7th grade initiative program, youth sports, and our enrichment programs. Next, please. Our plan is to continue with Operation Compassion, the donor-funded program to support the urgent needs of our community during this pandemic. And we will continue to provide meals to anyone who needs it, continuing to partner with local restaurants, food stores, and donors. We are working to become a child and adult care food program sponsor and summer food service program sponsor. So while before our youth centers were considered sites of a sponsor that we worked with, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, they provided the meals. We are applying to switch that. So we are now going to become the sponsors. This will enable us to receive direct reimbursements from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which will in turn allow us to strengthen and expand our offerings. And we will aim to feed all children and families, as I mentioned, in all of our programs, such as also sending children home with weekend backpacks of food and setting up community sites where anyone can stop in and pick up food during designated times. Because we know that often food insecure families, their parents will not eat to give out what little food they do have to their children. So we want to make sure everybody in the family is fed. So finally, and here's some of the kids in our program eating their meals. Our hope is that by coming together to provide access to food to needy children and families, we can all work together to create true equality for all. It is only when children are first provided with the most basic need of being fed that this can truly happen. Thank you. I really appreciate you listening to me today. And I'd like to mention that our Operation Compassion webpage is in the link here, our link, and there's more information there. Please consider checking that out and giving to the Y to help support this great need of feeding hungry children and families in our community. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen, for joining us today and talking to us about the wonderful work you and the Y are doing. I mean, it is so important, and I hope people will take advantage of the link and learn more about your program and hopefully choose to become involved. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again in our Q&A in a few minutes.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Our next speaker is Samantha Gross. Samantha is the Associate Dean for Academic Initiatives in the Office of the Provost at Bucks County Community College. She's also part-time faculty in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at Bucks. Samantha earned her BA in History from Brandeis University and holds master's degrees from Clemson University and Carnegie Mellon. Last summer, she completed a Women in Leadership certificate at Cornell. She's a longtime Bucks County resident who lives in Yardley with her husband and children, and importantly, their dog, Willa. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you so much. I wanted to first start by thanking the League of Women Voters of Bucks County for putting this program together, and to thank all of you who are participating by watching this webinar at home today. And please excuse me, I have my allergies have started early this year. So I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Initiatives at Bucks County Community College, and I started in that role about 3.5 years ago. And when I started in that role, I had been doing some research about student retention. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And I came across an article by a very well-known scholar in education, Vincent Tinto, who wrote an article called, among many others that he's written, "Access Without Support is Not Opportunity." And I saw the title alone and was really struck by what it said, and that to me, it said everything. Because I reflected on the mission of our college, which is at the center of this slide here, that Bucks County Community College's mission is to provide a diverse community of learners with exemplary, accessible educational opportunities. And I knew that, education, and we all know, equals opportunity, and there are so many statistics and stories we know about that, earning and possibilities and so forth. And so I started to think about what we were doing at the college and doing some other research about student needs, and this all sort of fit to me, that we needed to start thinking about non-academic barriers to student success, and our provost was very much supportive of this. And so if you can go to the next slide, please. We started to talk, in her office about, what are these non-academic barriers to success? Well, they're those things that without them, students are going to struggle in school, right? So things like food, childcare, transportation, housing, and mental health. And we already have a fantastic counseling program in place for our students, but there were these other needs that we knew that we weren't really helping them with as an institution. And so we decided to start with food. And one of our counselors at the college had said, I'm so glad you're doing this because, quoting our counselor, she said, we assume that students' basic needs are being met. And I think this was for a lot of higher ed. And that is not the reality. If we can go to the next slide, please. So just like we heard about in the introduction in Jennifer's presentation, there are some very real ramifications for students who are food insecure. And I just want to highlight one with this slide, because we saw with the previous presentation about some of the even health and physiological problems that go along with hunger. For us, you know, we pulled up several studies, and they were all pointing to the same thing, that said students who are food insecure are not performing as well as their food secure classmates. And from an institutional perspective, right, when it's harder for students to persist to their academic goals, from the institution's perspective, right, it becomes harder to retain them. And we don't want to see students coming in, taking a few classes, and then not having that credential at the end of the day. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we did, like many other higher ed institutions, take part in the Hope Center's annual survey, and we found that about 50% of Bucks students who participated in that survey pre-pandemic indicated that at some point that semester they experienced some form of food insecurity. And at this point, we had already been doing our food insecurity work for about a year and a half, 2 years. And so we knew, of course, that it existed, and we had done an internal survey that told us about a third were food insecure. So this was absolutely mind-blowing, and in a way also really devastating to think, excuse me, that, you know, if we have a class of 30 students, half of them at some point in that semester are going to experience food insecurity, and further, about 10 to 15% of them, it was severe and chronic. So again, with that classroom of 30 students, we could think that 3 to 5 of them were food insecure the entire semester. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we really wanted to focus on creating a culture of caring. And for us, that meant building positive relationships with students, seeing students as whole people, and building awareness of academic and non-academic barriers. And one of the things that we did, and we'll see this a little bit on the next slide, but I'll mention it here, is that we started to reframe the sort of the old stereotypes about college students. So we've probably seen movies and TV shows, right, where there's the student who's been up partying all night and then misses their midterm or has fallen asleep in class. And we said, well, let's think about the other possibilities as to why a student is sleeping in class or not showing up. And when we took that scenario and looked at it through the lens of basic needs insecurity, we could see that there were so many other more likely reasons that students were not performing their best. So things like students might have been sleeping in their cars. They are couch surfing. They have not had a nutritionally sound meal for days. So there were so many other reasons why students could be doing some of these like stereotypical behaviors, and we wanted to start thinking about those other possibilities so that we could support our students. Next slide, please. So I am just one on a team at Bucks County Community College who was and is part of the actions we are taking to support our basic needs insecure students. One of the things that we worked on, and this is a Sarah Goldrick-Rab suggestion, is to have a syllabus statement on all of our syllabi, which refers students to forms of assistance. So we went through our governance system, and we as a group put forth a proposal, and it was passed and so forth. So now that every single syllabus for every single class that a student is going to take, the bottom of that syllabus, there's a statement, you know, that if you are experiencing these difficulties, please go to this link. And then that takes them to a website that we had created, or a page on our website that we had created, where students can go, they can apply for help, and we also have other resources listed for them there, such as the Bucks County Opportunity Council services and food pantries. So these resources are always posted on our website for students to find. And what we found very effective is that we post periodically on Canvas, which is our learning management system. So once a student fills out that application, they're contacted by a new position that we created, which is a case manager. We have a licensed social worker who works with them. Students, to start off with, will receive a $50 grocery store gift card and a suggested shopping list and information about county resources, including food pantries. So the suggested shopping list, we worked with a registered dietitian and said to her, okay, if you had $50 to go into the grocery store, what would you do with it to put together some nutritionally sound meals? And of course, that is just a suggestion that we give our students. One of the reasons that I really like that the grocery store gift card is sort of the bedrock of our program is because we're putting the power in the hands of the students, and they know best what they need. They might choose to spend that money on diapers or hygiene products, right? Things that even if they're on SNAP, they wouldn't be able to purchase with that benefit. Maybe they have children and they want to get some fun kids cereals to bring a little liveliness to their kids' breakfast, whatever it is. We leave that to our students. Faculty and administrators are offered professional development opportunities to learn about food insecurity among Bucks students, and that's been very powerful. Something else that's been incredibly powerful are partnerships. And I'll have a slide on that after this, but we really could not do what we do without partnerships from organizations in the community. Right now, we're working on a small rollout of emergency funds for students. And this was really something we had in mind, but was spurred by all of the increased need we were seeing because of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So pre-pandemic, we also had a couple of other programs. One, which was a suggestion of our students. We were always asking our students, what can we do to support you? And we heard from a lot of them that they wanted a healthy snack available to them, like a grab and go healthy snack. So we had fresh fruit available on all 3 campuses. We had big fruit baskets set up, and our food service would refill them for us twice a week. And I loved this program because students, this is something that they wanted. We were responding to their request, and also because it was stigma free. We had them outside of our wellness center, a fitness center. So you had students grabbing a banana after a workout, right? And then you had students maybe grabbing a banana because they couldn't afford breakfast, but no one knows, right? And this was out there and open to everyone. We had been just about ready to open food pantries on all of our campuses, literally a week before COVID came. So that is something we're going to get back to when we're back on campus. And we did something called the Bucks Holiday Helpers event, which was very, very popular. Employees donated new or very gently used giftable items, and students had 3 days to shop for free, and employees volunteered to wrap those gifts for them. We said, the holidays are an extremely stressful time for pretty much everyone, but an especially stressful time for our students when they're taking finals and thinking about how they're going to pay for classes next semester and holiday gifts and all of that. So again, this was open to all students. So it was a stigma-free event. You could have just been there because it was, it was cool. We had cookies and hot chocolate and coffee, right? Or you could have been there because that was your holiday shopping for your family. And Unfortunately, we're obviously not able to do that this past December. We're looking forward to getting back to that when we're back on campus. We did have about, excuse me, about almost 200 students shop over 3 days. And this year, our foundation, which is, I should have said at the beginning, a very equal partner with academic affairs in this initiative, fundraised gift cards so students in need could, again, do, whatever they wanted with that, that money for the holidays, more groceries, toys for their kids, and so forth. So our funding pretty much all comes from donations and grants. The case manager funding comes from the provost office. And one of the really nice things that we're seeing right now is that students are getting interested in this and want to help their fellow students. Our honors at Bucks Club fundraised and organized complete Thanksgiving dinners for 20 Bucks students in need. And our Hillel Club is in the process of becoming the only community college Challah for Hunger chapter in the country. Next, please. And so partnerships, as I said before, have been invaluable. Just this week, I referred a student to the Bucks County Opportunity Council self-sufficiency program, but in the past, we have worked with them and they have saved a student from eviction. They've helped our students with transportation, housing, paying bills. The Magic Charities Foundation of Newtown, we have been really blessed to work with them and learn from their knowledge. They donated groceries over the summer, fresh fruits and vegetables for our students to pick up. We did something similar with Nutritional Development Services, providing groceries for parenting students. And we've also learned a lot from Diane Casey at the Interfaith Food Alliance, and her knowledge about pantries and so forth has been invaluable to us. So thank you all so much for listening to me, and I am very happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Samantha. It's wonderful to hear
Thank
about the good work you're doing at Bucks County. And I know that people will want to check out your website, and there are, I'm sure, some questions.
Please
if you want
do, yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And
Thank
welcome
you so
back.
much.
Thank you for coming. Really, we'll look forward to interesting exchange in our Q&A. And welcome back, Lydia. She will be introducing our next speaker.
Okay, worrying about rent, the next meal, gas, maintenance for a car is not compatible with being a serious student who also still can enjoy the luxury of some time to relax and friendship. I ask you to listen to our next guest, who is an anonymous student who did have to drop out of Bucks County Community College, and he is sharing a slice of his life with us. Thank you.
What happened to you from high school as you were looking on to college?
I tried to focus on college as much as I could. Towards the end of my high school graduation, I knew I wanted to get my gen eds out the way because they didn't really seem all that important at the time. They just kind of seemed like another roadblock that I had to push through.
What was your goal? What's your chosen interest career?
Programming.
Okay, so computer programming.
Computer programming, software development, and that kind of stuff.
Okay, so there was a day when people could just have a natural instinct and move along in this career. And today, though, you are bogged down with that more people will ask, do you have a degree or do you have a certificate? Is that correct?
Yes.
How far did you get?
I took a few college courses. I'm not entirely sure what the progress would have been. I got English out the way. I took a language class. I was working on math because I was a bit behind on that. I know math would have been important as long as I knew what context I needed for the code.
When you went to Bucks, what was your housing circumstance at that point?
I was in a group home at the time.
And when you turned 18, did you age out of the group home?
They weren't going to kick me out until I was 21. I had made a friend there. We decided to move in together, and that lasted a few months in an apartment somewhere, but he had some personal things that he had to move out for. I completely understand that was all too much for him, and he had to move, and luckily he helped me with the rent so I can finish up the lease, and that was done. I had already been out of college for like a year and a half at that point.
Okay, so at that point, you just felt that just finding a place to live, a good job, keeping a car on the road was enough issues for you. What would have helped you stay in college?
Maybe if they had some courses to keep me on what I was actually planning on doing throughout the entire thing, instead of giving me like 5 general education courses at the very beginning and then going into the specialized field.
Okay, so
would have helped out a lot. I would have preferred to learn some more things that were relevant to what I wanted to learn more towards the beginning.
do you think if your circumstances had been easier and you weren't as worried every day about fending for yourself, that you might have been more tolerant to, let's say, play the college game and do the gen ed courses and get them the hell out of the way and move forward? But for you, it felt like you were wasting time and money?
I wasn't wasting my own money. Luckily, I was able to get enough financial aid to the point where I didn't have to pay anything, and it was enough that I didn't have to loan anything out.
Okay.
So I wasn't wasting any of my own money. I was worried about wasting someone else's money with me wasting time with courses.
So in terms of being at the low income end, college and tuition were not an issue. That was rising to meet your needs, and you had qualified for the maximum amount of aid.
Yes.
Whether it was
The problem at that point was more so my own focus rather than money.
Mm-hmm.
The money portion of my struggle just came from keeping my car good enough to stay on the road or keeping the repairs up to date. Meeting rent as well as bills. That was a little bit of a struggle for me, and I'll admit I made some bad decisions with my money. Being
That's
okay.
19,
you're gonna make some mistakes.
Right. And being 19 and on your own.
Yes.
So you worked pretty much in a vacuum on your own and had to proceed based on as much information as you had accumulated. Was there anybody in the college that you ever spoke to about what you were struggling with to stay with, something that really interested you, and what options?
My advisor did know that I wanted to get to my programming courses, and of course he told me I had to take my gen eds, I had to get to a certain point in math, I had to jump through this hoop, that hoop, and the other to get to what I was trying to do. I think at this point I'll look more into trade school rather than college, because that might get me more towards what I want a little quicker.
A certificate program
Yes.
is very valid. They are covered by financial aid for college, which there was a time when they weren't, so you're doing that. And what help would you need besides the financial aid for college to really get a handling and go forward on this?
I'm not really sure at the moment. I know I'm at the moment looking for a better job than I have right now, because obviously you need a bit more money to have some kind of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And working at a grocery store isn't really going to get you that kind of money. So something higher paying would probably help me out quite a bit. It'll give me enough of a reward to myself that I'll be able to refocus onto something like that again, where I don't have to worry about going to work every single day to make enough to make ends meet.
Are you on any assistance program at this point?
Not at the moment.
Were you eligible, or have you not even applied?
I'm not sure if I ever was eligible. I never really checked.
I'm guessing you might be. What I'm hearing is, for you, you maybe didn't assess it as food insecurity is my major issue. But what you assessed is, I don't have enough money to proceed in all the pieces that go into the puzzle to get me in school. And whether it's that rent became a bigger focus for you than the food, or vice versa, And of course, in Bucks County, public transportation is very limited. So the need for a car, it's not a luxury.
If I had to take public transportation while going to college, while living where I was living, it would have taken me about 2 hours to get to college alone. I'm not even sure how many transfers I would have had to take or how much the bus fare would have been. So I'm very lucky to have had my car.
But your
if I didn't
car
have that,
had
it
to
would
be
have been-
fed like a baby.
Oh, of course. Gas has always been a pretty high price because you have to pay that just about every week. That on top of rent, on top of bills, on top of food, I kind of had to cut some things loose. So towards the end of my tenant where I lived, I did have some pretty bare fridge.
Did you have any feeling that there was anybody out there that was interested in your plight?
No, I kind of always feel like I have to fight for myself. That's just been a constant in my life.
And if there was a program through a trade school, through a community college, that did sit down and help you mentor a path of, okay, we can get you connected for food stamps. We can get you tuition. We will help you with the process of filling out the financial aid forms for tuition cuts. Do you think that if it were all in one place and you didn't have to call Bucks County Health Department and you didn't have to do the check with this person, do you think if it were all in one place, offered as a service at a college, it would make it easier for you to get back on track and pursue your goal?
I think if something like that were more readily available for young adults, there would probably be less people in my position, probably more people out getting whatever help they needed so that they can actually live a life kind of decent at the very least. Maybe get an apartment, maybe have your own place away from your parents while you're at college so you can become your own person and start to stand on your own 2 feet eventually.
Right. Now, it seems to me, without us getting very personal, fairly young, you've had to watch out for yourself.
Yes. I've been independent for quite some time.
And as I talk to you here, you sound like you're somebody who's put together a philosophy that's working for you right now about, I better watch out for me because there's nobody or not enough of somebody there that I can count on. So if you were going to design a program or an office, what services do you think a younger person coming from a low-income family life needs to be able to actually keep focus and study school and have a part-time job? What services would you?
I think as long as someone can show that they're interested in improving the community or getting into some kind of specialized field that people actually need workers in, they should be provided some kind of compensation, or not really compensation, but some kind of aid to help them get towards that goal if they're struggling to get there.
Okay, so aid could come in the way of, number one, some food and some housing credits.
Something like that, yes.
One of the things that we are trying to promote is the idea of pulling the community social worker into the college to be able to tell you what programs you'd be eligible for. My feeling is that you have missed some benefits. I'm very proud to meet you and know that you have fought to make it. But I would like to say to you that there is some help out there. And if that goal of going on to gain some certificates towards programming, and then you can always add education. You can do it in pieces and you can add it. And as you said, number one would be food. Number two would be
some kind of housing benefit.
There is almost no transportation in Bucks, so we're not going to
get some kind of better SEPTA system. There's nothing for Upper Bucks or hardly anything for Central Bucks.
Basically nothing. So those are three important life needs to be able to succeed. And there are, yes, some people who get that from home and they coast. But you're not alone in having needs, and you're not alone in not even knowing who you could have asked after a certain age, because I feel like somebody gave you a message, you're on your own. You've handled it pretty well in my thinking.
I think I was told to go for it, and I didn't really have the equipment really that I needed to get there.
What I'm trying to stress, don't wait till the waters are creeping up above your nose, because it could maybe all be easier a little bit. I hear you as a very thoughtful, purposeful, and direction-oriented person who's gotten stymied by life's tedious things like eating, sleeping, and driving. And I would like you to know that I am trying to work on a program that will get more information out to people who might be eligible for services even now, not even the new ones that we're trying to work on. And I would like to be able to offer you them when I find what's eligible. And I do think you are eligible. Do you have health insurance?
Yes, I do.
Because that's something that's there, and everybody is entitled to have insurance. Looking forward, would you like to create a timeline that would help you reach a goal?
I think I already kind of have one in mind.
Where do you think?
I think at the moment I'm beginning my current journey. I need to make a few steps, get a couple of things, do some things, and then at that point I should be good.
Are you thinking that you're more willing to suffer through some coursework that seems tedious and unnecessary?
Soon, I think.
If you could right now go to school freer, what would it take? Housing and food subsidies?
I think I would just need a place to really focus, free from any distractions, because I do get distracted fairly easily, and just food to keep me going.
And some healthy food.
Yeah, something better than just packaged ramen.
Mm-hmm.
Packaged ramen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Lydia, for that very, very moving interview with a young man. And obviously, every student's situation is different, but sadly, there are many, many students suffering with food and housing insecurity in Bucks County here. I would like to turn it over to a slightly different perspective. Our next speaker has a little bit different view on this issue. Wendy Allman. Please, join us. Wendy served her community as state representative of the 143rd Legislative District from 2019 to 2020. In her committee and legislative work, was actively engaged in numerous initiatives, most notably election reform, economic and social support for families, protection of the environment, and excellence in public education, especially higher education. Prior to her service as a representative, Allman was a professor of English at Bucks County Community College and at Montgomery County Community College. She taught composition and literature and also worked with the AFT. Allman and her husband have lived in Bucks County for 42 years and have 3 grown daughters and 2 grandchildren. Thank you. I look forward to hearing your perspective on this issue, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so pleased to see so many committed, involved people here today. It is a privilege to join your company. Food security, insecurity is an issue I have been passionate about for many years. As a representative, of course, I was able to learn intimately some of the realities of insecurity in the 143rd district. This district is in the northeastern quadrant of the county, and it's the largest one. It has a lot of examples of rural poverty, which is pretty grinding. And one of the areas in that district is one of the two in the county which are designated as food deserts. I was able to work with local charities and organizations to distribute food with Rolling Harvest. I helped hold food drives for local collection. But I first learned about the hidden face of hunger around 20 years ago while teaching at Bucks County Community College. One day I was collecting papers at the end of class, and a student hung back and handed me a handwritten paper. I asked her why it wasn't typed. Her face crumbled. And I said, "Sheila, what's up? Let's go to my office." The story came out. She had been living in her car with her little boy for 3 days after she left an unsafe living situation. She had a knapsack and a sack of groceries with peanut butter and bread and a jug of soda that she'd been able to buy. I sat her down and made a bunch of phone calls, including one to my husband. I told him, "Don't ask, just please bring home 2 pizzas and I'll explain later." Sheila and her little boy spent the night with us. And the next day she was able to get into a shelter that was close enough to continue to attend class. Sheila was able to finish her semester. Not all students can. People ask, do elected officials really pay attention to constituent outreach? You bet they do. Constituents are the only people who can vote for them. This is a call to action. I want to tell you about legislative initiatives that the League of Women Voters is asking for your help to support. These are programs and bills which directly address food insecurity as it relates to college students. Next slide, please. The first of these I want to talk about is the Nellie Bly Scholarship Program. It's been reintroduced this year by Governor Wolf. This is a need-based financial assistance program for students at the 14 universities of the PASHE system. Those are the public supported state system. It would help cover costs not currently covered by Pell or Pennsylvania state grants. Students who have an income of under $105,000 would qualify, and they would need to agree to stay in Pennsylvania for the same number of years as they receive benefits. This program also creates, this is very important, an emergency grant fund to meet those emergency expenses which so often derail students from their forward trajectory. It also, and I think you need to know that this program, which is only a proposal at this point, will need citizen support during the budget process, which is typically May through June. You may know that Pennsylvania is facing a $2 billion revenue shortfall and therefore extreme pressure on budget. There are 2 proposed bills from the next slide, please. The Pennsylvania House of Representatives has 2 proposed bills that are in the works right now. The first is hunger-free college campuses, and this is sponsored by Representatives Kenyatta and O'Mara. And the plan is to introduce bills which would establish a grant program for institutions that take action to eliminate hunger on campus, as well as directing the Budget and Finance Committee to collect data and issue a report on campus food insecurity statewide. Another bill, the Post-Secondary Help for Homeless Students, is sponsored by Representatives Razi and Bullock, and this would require institutions of higher learning to prioritize homeless and foster youth with on-campus housing and access to other housing resources during breaks, which is absolutely critical if they're going to be able to continue to attend. It would also extend tuition waivers to foster youth that is available to foster youth to homeless students, and this would certainly have helped our previous student. It would create a homeless youth liaison to identify the services and aid that are available. Next slide, please. In the Pennsylvania Senate, there is a bill which will be reintroduced called the Pennsylvania Promise Act. This is sponsored by Senator Hughes, and it would provide last dollar financial assistance to eligible full-time students at state-owned or state-related institutions. This would be a qualifying point of an annual income of $110,000 or less. This also has additional assistance to cover room and board for students with family income of $48,000 or less. And it would provide grants for adult learners seeking additional credentials. Again, this kind of support is essential for people who are of limited means, because if they need to go to a four-year institution in our area, there are some that you can drive to, but in many areas there are zero. They are drivable. Next slide, please. There are some federal legislative proposals that are coming up. One is actually a triumph. This is the American Rescue Plan Act, which was passed just, I guess, 10 days ago now. But another which is in the works is relaunching America's Workforce Act, which is introduced in the House by Representative Scott and in the Senate by Senator Murray. This would invest $15 billion in workforce training, as well as career and technical training, and importantly, expanding adult education capacity to prioritize adults with low literacy levels, and extending grants for community colleges. It also supports business partnerships and provides pathways to high-wage, in-demand jobs. Next slide, please. In the Congress are some bills which are of interest but not yet introduced. One of these is the Emergency Grant Aid for College Students. This is introduced by Senator Tina Smith and would establish emergency financial aid grants, which would codify and extend emergency aid on a permanent basis moving forward. And the College Affordability Act, introduced by Representative Scott, is extremely important. It's a comprehensive revision of the current financial aid programs. It would increase Pell Grant levels, it would revise student federal loan payment options, and it would increase student access and support for low-income students. Also of importance is the College for All Act, which has been supported by many individuals, including then Senator Joe Biden. It would make public colleges and universities tuition-free for students whose incomes are below $125,000. So what can you do? Next slide, please. This is a call to action. You can be the voice of our county, urging our elected officials to support our values. Never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has. This is a famous quote by Bucks County luminary Margaret Mead. So here are some suggestions for integrated and impactful communication to support legislation. You will find links to these websites in the chat. Find the contact information for your elected officials. It'll get you to your state legislators and to your federal legislators. Make your communication as personal and as memorable as possible. Obviously, all forms can be used. Emails work, phone calls work, postcards are work, but really the most personal and the most impactful is personal visits to your legislator's office, if you can manage it. When you are putting together your message, consider your audience and adjust your message accordingly. And if at all possible, try to commit to follow the legislation through every step. There are multiple steps. Familiarize yourself with these steps that a bill must pass through to become a law. Your impact can be very impactful at every single step. There are many opportunities to communicate and different individuals to communicate with. I'm sorry, next slide, please. The individuals that you can communicate with are obviously your elected legislator, but you can also contact committee chairs, committee members, governor and support staff, and the president and support staff. There are different points along the way of a bill. The memorandum is particularly important to ask your legislator to be a co-sponsor of a memorandum. Once the bill is introduced, there are some steps that go through, and then for step 4, once it has been referred, it goes to a specific committee. At that point, it's very helpful if you contact the majority chair. The majority chair decides when or if a bill goes on the agenda. This is where good bills sometimes go to die. So really working at contacting the majority chair and expressing your interest in having that bill heard is very helpful. There are some more steps. Once the bill is on the agenda in the committee, this is your opportunity to talk to all of their individuals who are on that committee and ask them to pass the bill. Once it goes, presuming the bill is passed, it goes back to the originating chamber. Watch out for amendments. Amendments can radically change what the bill is. And so be aware of the amendments and voice concerns or suggestions for that matter. And then, of course, if it passes in the chamber, it goes to the next chamber. You need to, at that point, contact the corresponding elected official in the chamber. If it is amended, it goes back for reconciliation. There's a lot of back and forth here. And then there's a vote for concurrence. At each of these steps, there is an opportunity for you to go ahead and voice your opinion. And then, of course, presuming it passes both chambers, it goes to the governor. And again, you get that opportunity to communicate. Remember, it is your voice that communicates your values. I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. And at this time, I'm going to turn this back to our moderator for questions. I wish I could stay and join you for questions, but I regret to say, actually I don't, that I have to leave for a very important appointment to get my second dose of the vaccine. So I thank you for asking me to join you. I applaud your commitment and your energies, and thank you so much, and I'll leave you now. Goodbye.
At this time, I would like to respond to the many questions that have been put into the Q&A. The guest speakers have also the opportunity to see the Q&A, and they can see that certain of the questions are directed specifically for them. And there's one question that says, are the WISE food insecure services for K through 12 and Bucks's program accessed evenly throughout the county? Jen has offered to respond to this.
Yes, we do provide food opportunities for children throughout the county. Right now, that's at about 65% of our sites. We are looking to expand that. So when I discussed earlier our moving forward efforts, our goal is to support children and also expand to their families in all of our sites where we serve children, so 100%.
Okay, there's a question here for Samantha. Does the college offer any budgeting or food preparation guidance? By the way, it sounds like you're doing a terrific job addressing the problems of food insecurity. So that's a very nice compliment to you and the program.
Yes, thank you so much for that. We don't offer, well, I shouldn't say we don't offer, we don't require it for our students, but we provide, is to say like extracurricular opportunities for them. We have like financial literacy fairs. We do in our intro seminar, which new students take. not a whole picture of financial literacy, but more like, okay, so how are you going to pay for next semester without getting too personal? So not required, but we do have programs offered for students.
Thank you.
Welcome.
There are several questions that come under the same category of concern for immigrant students and undocumented students. And one of them is, and I'm going to throw it open to either of you, how do you try to support the undocumented student graduating from high school, which means, Jen, maybe you have been dealing with them, and looking for college admission in addition to all the effects of the food insecurity they have? I'll throw it to you first, Samantha, okay?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Sure. From, where I sit, I don't know if someone is undocumented or not. I do know that we do have DACA students at the school. I can see, we don't ask anyone to identify or show any kind of anything, other than their student ID number when they want to access any of our programs.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this question.
Sure.
Many DACA students and undocumented who didn't fall under that category stay way beneath the radar because they do not want to be found.
Absolutely.
But it does seem that there needs to be, just as you've added something to your documentation about being available for help, maybe an extra reaching out without identifying them but welcoming. Do you think that's something that could be added or maybe exists and it's just not out of your office even?
It's possible. We do have an English language learner program, and to be honest, I'm not as familiar with what perhaps they are doing with the students, but not direct, nothing directly for undocumented students.
So I'll leave that thought with you to
Thank you. It's a
bring
great
back
thought.
to the provost and yours. And I'm going to throw it to Jen and you with your experience K through 12. How do you approach the undocumented student and give them extra help maybe?
As Samantha said, my seat as well, I do not have a lot of information about that. We really just treat all families equally and try to provide equal opportunities to anybody coming in, not turning anyone away if they're not able to afford our fees. We do ask as part of our surveys or if we're providing demographic information, but it's up to each individual family to decide if they'd like to share that with us. So that is not, I don't know on an individual basis, and I couldn't really answer that.
Okay, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just reading through the questions, and one of the questions was about limited English proficiency. And Samantha, you did answer that there is an approach and a program. And I think you answered also the question of special dietary rules. It sounded like you said you made some connection for halal food to be available. One of you said that. Is that something that's been added to the program recently?
Not on our side.
Yeah, that is something I didn't answer that, but the sponsor that we currently work with, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, does provide different meal options depending on that. So if a family does need that, we would provide that. We also do provide brochures in different languages if needed, just to communicate some of our offerings for our YMCA programs that we do offer. So if a family needs some information translated, we do try to provide that as well to really cross that gap of communication issues.
And that is something very needed. Most people look at forms and freeze anyway. I have a question here for Samantha Gross. Does the college offer any budgeting or food prep guidance?
I think we answered that one.
Oh, yes, you did. That's my fault. Excuse me.
It's okay.
Okay, the question I wanted to ask next is, what degree of parent participation do you have? This would be more for Jen, with food insecurity in your K through 12 student population?
So traditionally, what I've seen, having worked at the Y for almost 15 years, parents who are from food insecure families are often struggling. So they're in the midst of that struggle. And we know that we see parents in and out of jobs, some dealing with drug addictions, parents having to turn to grandparents and even great grandparents to support children, incarceration. You know, there's many issues that are going on regularly. So parent participation has not been a strength for some of our families to come in and actually offer, you know, their time volunteering. Some parents do. I can't say they all don't. But it's not very common. So we really rely heavily on community organizations and the support of individuals to come along and offer their help, whether that's volunteering. We have organizations that will send employees in to read. You know, pre-COVID, they would come in and read to the children or help provide meals and learning opportunities. Groups like the United Way of Bucks County, we partner up with them, or St. Mary Medical Center. So there's really, you know, we really rely heavily on the community support to come in and help to feed our children and all the other services we offer.
Thank you. I have a question here for Samantha. Are there resources available for students like our anonymous presenter that he and students like him don't know about? He mentioned he was in a group home. It surprises me that more resources and support services aren't available to him through Children and Youth or other such organizations. This
Yeah,
seems
that's a great question. So I don't know when he was a student. Like I said, this is a recent, you know, our action's a little bit more recent. So it's very possible that he was a student before we began these programs.
Yes, he was, definitely.
He was, okay. And, you know, and it sounds like they possibly would have helped him a great deal, particularly connecting with a social worker. Also, I don't know if he was a student before the act for, you know, former foster youth was passed. So I don't know where he is in that timeline either. But I think all of the programs that we have now would have benefited him. We do work with, so part of that act for the foster, you know, former foster youth, we're part of a larger organization, and we have two folks on campus, me and someone from financial aid, who are point people for former foster youth. And so they know if they have questions about anything sort of financial aid, student accounts, they have a direct contact to Nicole. And if they have questions on the academic side, then I am their contact for that. And that is published on their website. We do sometimes work with Tabor Services and set up, you know, made sure that their students were introduced to us and so forth. And prior to COVID had planned some tours, but, you know, we've had campus tours for their students as well. But I think their students are already in a way supported through Tabor. It is very, very difficult for former foster students. And it sounds, you know, from the gentleman who was part of that interview and what I heard from him, and I think what happens to a lot of basic needs insecure students is that their bandwidth is completely depleted. You know, borrowing from Sia Verschelden's work. And you know, I hope now that the programs that we have in place will help students like him.
I have to say the questions and comments that I have gotten and texts along the way suggest that the two of you and your agencies are really working hard and currently trying to meet as many needs as possible. There's a question, and I'll throw it out to both of you. What more do you want from the community? What you mentioned some help in even coming in and reading to the children. Tell us, what more can you get? This is all can't be legislated without the help of It Takes a Village. So tell us what else you need.
I think the community partnerships have been, like I said, invaluable. transportation, as that student, in the interview mentioned, transportation can be, obviously not right now, but transportation can be a struggle for our students because, as he said, it's very hard to get around in this county, particularly Central Bucks on up. And he is absolutely right. It will take our students who use the bus like 2 hours. There are a few lines that come to the campus, but it will take some of them like 2 hours.
That would be
to get to
something
the
good for us to keep working on as advocacy groups. Do you have something, one added thing? This is our last question. Jen, do you have something that you would love the community to jump in and get more serious about helping?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're looking to make all of our sites open sites. So we're working with the USDA to become child and adult care food program sponsors and summer food program sponsors. And we can't just rely on the USDA. We need the support of the community. We need donations to make all of those sites really connected resources for our families that they can come in, they can get family style meals when their children are in the programs. For many of the children, this is their safe place to be. So when they come in, we want them to be fed, we want them to be happy, we want to connect them to gardens. Each of our locations will also have gardens. We want to set up kitchens so we can prep and prepare food and do it with the children so they can learn about healthy eating and nutrition. And we want to send them home with meals on the weekends and backpacks of food. So within all of those areas, we could use support, whether it's donations to help set up our food stations, vendors who want to help out and provide food, volunteers who want to come in. You know, we're a little bit limited right now with COVID to have people actually come in, but once we're able, we'd welcome you to come along. So yes, we could use all that support to really make this that caring, nurturing, and loving place that we want families to come to get what they need right now.
Well, I want to take this moment to thank our 3 guest speakers and our anonymous student. Jen Retorto, Samantha Gross, Wendy Ullman, 3 very dedicated people in our community. I thank them very much for sharing their expertise and, as everyone saw, their enthusiasm and their seriousness of purpose. And now I'm going to turn it back to Monica, who has a few words to say as we close this event. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia.
Yeah. Thank you, Lydia. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Bucks County, I would like to thank Jennifer, Samantha, and Wendy, as well as our anonymous student for a very informative program today. This session has been recorded and will be available on the League's website and Facebook page. I just put the link in the chat. This has been the second of 3 programs in the series, each of which are examining different aspects of the problem of hunger in our community. The third and final program will be on Saturday, April 10th. We hope you can attend this very special program, as it will seek to answer the big question, what can we do about this problem? Whether you're looking to learn what you can do as an individual or a member of a service organization, we will uncover how we can mobilize and become effective advocates for all people, young and old, who are experiencing food insecurity. You will be receiving a follow-up email in a day or so, which will have information about signing up for the last program. And it will also include a short survey to help us design future programs. And we'd appreciate the feedback. I would also like to invite you to join us and become a member of the League of Women Voters of Bucks County. We're a nonpartisan group open to both women and men, and we are committed to creating and promoting a diverse and inclusive environment in our organization and in the areas in which we work. For more information on becoming a member, please refer to the link I just put in the chat. This concludes our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again on April 10th. Bye now.